Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Hangout. Today's Hangout is on the Google Shopping Ads GTIN requirement. My name is Albert, and joining me in the studio in Mountain View, California is Shweta. And later joining us from Pittsburgh will be our good friend Mike, who's going to help us with answering your questions. Our agenda today is pretty simple, just two things. We want to give you an overview of GTINs and our new Shopping Ads GTIN requirement. And secondly, to answer as many questions as we can from all of you in the 45 minutes that we have with you today. So if you have any questions, please feel free to submit them to the app below, and we'll try to get through as many of them as we possibly can. So we're going to start with some of the basics. What are GTINs? GTIN actually stands for Global Trade Item Number. But for many of you, you probably know it as the numbers underneath the barcode that are found on many of your favorite products, like a Chromecast. GTINs are really, really special because they uniquely identify a product. So there's one product that corresponds to every GTIN. And if you want to nerd out a little bit more, GTINs can vary in length from 8 to 12, 13, or 14 digits. And there is a little bit of a method to that madness. The beginning of every GTIN actually is a prefix for a specific company or manufacturer who has reserved that. And therefore, we can preserve the uniqueness in each one of these GTINs. For us in Google Shopping, these GTINs are really, really important. They help us match the correct product to a user's query, so we can help you find what you're looking for. GTINs help us bundle similar products together, like if you're searching for living room furniture ideas. And they help us bundle retailers who sell the same product together. For merchants, because users can more easily find what they're looking for, we've seen that they find products a little bit more often. And so your products that have GTINs are a little bit more discoverable. And we've seen an increase in conversion rates of up to 20%.
OK, so as on May 16, 2016, Google will require merchants to submit correct GTINs. So items that are missing GTIN or have invalid GTIN will be disapproved at the item level. So let's look at which items require GTIN and which do not. So items that are brand new products sold by multiple merchants in 11 countries. So that includes US, UK, Germany, France, Italy, Spain, Switzerland, Czech Republic, Japan, Australia, and Brazil will require GTIN. So the items that do not require GTIN are basically the used goods, if you are selling custom goods, or if you're the only seller of those goods, or they are in-house brands. They do not require GTIN. So what's the best way to find out which products require GTIN? So if you log into your Merchant Center account and go to Diagnostics, you'll see the current issues at the item level, and you will be able to see a messaging, which is a warning messaging in yellow, let you know which items require GTIN that you need to fix by May 16, 2016.
We hope that gave you a pretty good overview of what GTINs are and why we're asking for them. We know they're requiring a little bit more work for our customers, but we hope the benefits outweigh some of that initial investment. With that, we want to just ask again, if you have any questions about this new Google Shopping Ads GTIN requirement, please, please, please add them in the box below. Submit those questions. We want to get through as many as we can through the rest of the time that we have today. As we get started, I wanted to reintroduce Mike, our friend from Pittsburgh, who's going to help us answer the questions. So Mike, do you want to say hi?
Hi, everyone. Great to be with you here today.
Awesome. We're going to kick it off with a few questions that we've heard pretty often since we announced this new requirement in February. So I'm going to kick it off to one that's probably in everyone's mind right now, which is, Mike, Shweta mentioned May 16th, 2016. I think if I do the math right, that's 7 weeks away. if I'm a retailer and I need to submit these GTINs, I think I'm freaking out a little bit. What do you recommend that they do?
First, don't panic. All the information you need is in the Merchant Center Diagnostics tab. If you don't see offers listed there, that means we aren't going to disapprove those offers. As Shweta said, you can identify those by looking for the GTINs where the warnings show up with a yellow icon that says item requires a GTIN, resolved by May 16th. These are the ones that require GTINs and no other ones. Ideally, you can update your systems once to ensure that GTINs always make it into your feed. We've seen a lot of merchants doing that. But if you have to take a more manual approach, we recommend prioritizing those offers that drive the most sales for you.
So Mike, I have a follow-up question to that. What's the best place to find the GTINs in bulk?
Yes, there's 3 places that we find retailers are getting this information today. First of all, the best place to look is your supply chain system. So GTINs are the standard way products are managed in the supply chain. You should have them somewhere in your warehousing, inventory, or fulfillment systems. So adding this data to your feed will address the requirement in the near term and ensure that future products meet the requirement as well. You can also get this information directly off of the products in your inventory. So GTINs show up on the packaging of the products you sell. The UPC code that you saw earlier appears on most products. So if you provide the number below the barcode, that will address the requirement. Finally, if you are a merchant who doesn't actually hold the inventory physically and you use a order and ship process, a drop shipping process, in that case, you should ask your drop ship vendor to add the GTINs to the data elements that you provide to them.
Excellent. I hope that's all coming through. This is such great information, Mike. I wanted to ask again for anyone who's watching to our Hangout Center. If you have questions, please do submit them. We want to get through as many questions as you have for us today. So let me ask you another one, Mike. Sometimes people believe that Google knows everything, and in this case, on the Google Shopping side, Google is getting GTINs from many of its customers. A natural question is, if I'm a retailer, why don't we have a tool that we can just help retailers that help us look up GTINs for retailers?
Right. Yes, we do get that question a lot. The way I always describe it is, there's a lot of similar products in the world. GTINs are really the only way to uniquely identify them everywhere. So any tool that we would use or offer to let people look things up by name could result in mismatches that end up undermining the user experience. And this is really why we're asking the merchants who are the source of this information to send us the GTINs. There's a lot of other things we can figure out once we have that GTIN, but that's one that we would only be guessing at. So it's really important that we get them directly from the merchants.
So Mike, I have another follow-up question. So I checked my Merchant Center account and I saw fewer warnings than I expected. Do you think I would be seeing more of these before May 16, 2016?
Great question. So at this point, we don't expect significantly more warnings to appear. The way we're identifying where they should appear is already in place, and the list that you're seeing are really the GTINs we're looking for. Not all products have GTINs. So any products that your company manufactures and sells directly may not have GTINs. And in those cases, if you're the sole seller for them, they don't really require GTINs, so we won't be requiring them. So if you have store brand or single seller products, those won't show up in the diagnostics tab. Things that we mentioned earlier, handmade and custom goods generally don't have GTINs. So for these, you shouldn't expect to see any more warnings before or after May 16th. If you send more products now as part of your feed, those will start to appear if they should have GTINs. But in general, what we're flagging right now with warnings, that's really the inventory that you have to focus on. And one reminder that I always want to throw out there, if GTINs don't exist for the products you have, don't try to create them. Don't put in a fake one, or even necessarily, if you're a manufacturer, create one just for this purpose. We really are only looking for GTINs when they actually already exist.
Great, thanks so much.
Thanks, Mike. And just to reiterate, I think this is really important. The best way to check to see which products need GTINs, as Shweta mentioned earlier, check your diagnostics section in your Merchant Center account. It should have a yellow warning that says item requires a GTIN, resolved by May 16th, 2016. One more question that we do get asked quite frequently, Mike, before we turn over to questions that we're getting submitted. Again, please submit questions to the box below that you have on Google Shopping Ads new GTIN requirement. This question is a little bit tricky for some users, but the question is, I don't fully understand why Google needs my GTIN. Can you explain, where it's used in the Google Shopping side? Can you explain a little bit more of how it's used, and then maybe how it's going to be used in the future?
Sure. So again, the way we use GTINs is to unambiguously identify your products and make sure that we're matching those to our product catalog. When we don't have GTINs, we're less confident about the identity of the items. So if we can't match to the catalog, we can't confidently show those in the different formats we have. So it's really important that we understand what they are. And when we're able to confidently do that, that can lead to better performance of your shopping ads. So things like showing your products in product cards on Google.com and showing them in the shopping tab on Google, as well as newer formats like purchases on Google, shopping ads on YouTube, Google Now cards, which we're starting to show. All of these really require us to have strong confidence that we have the right product. So this is really the benefit is we're more likely to use the offers that have these GTINs. It also allows us to enrich the information. So if you provide products in your feed and give us the GTIN, we can match it to the catalog. Oftentimes what that means is you'll get more content like videos and reviews and other metadata that helps increase users' confidence in their purchase. And we know that that leads to higher conversion rates. So when users know for sure what they're getting, they're more likely to convert when they get to your site.
So Mike, you're saying that it would help to improve my shopping ads performance.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've seen conversion rates increase by as much as 20% when somebody added a GTIN to a product that didn't have one before. So there's definite value in getting this information to us.
Great, thanks, Mike. So we have a few live questions coming in. That's great. The first one is from Megan, and she asks, is a GTIN still required even though you may not have one? So Mike, would you answer this one for Megan?
Sure. So the requirement, just sort of simply stated, is we require GTINs where GTINs exist. So if the product doesn't have a GTIN because it doesn't exist because the manufacturer never issued one, or if you are the manufacturer, you've never created one, we won't require it because we have no record of our own that a GTIN exists for that product. If, on the other hand, the products do have GTINs and you just don't have access to them, then in that case, we would want you to get the GTINs either from the manufacturer or from another system within your organization to fill in the feed.
Awesome.
Thanks.
Thanks, Mike. And thanks for submitting your questions. We're seeing a good, healthy stream of questions, so please continue to submit them. We've got, I think, about 30 minutes left today to answer as many as we can. Next question for you, Mike, and this is something that I've been wondering as well. Carolyn is asking, how do you define a custom good?
Great question.
This requirement doesn't require GTINs.
Mm-hmm.
That's right. So custom goods don't require GTINs. What we mean by that are, one example is a marketplace that sells goods that are crafted by artists or makers. So where somebody is ordering something custom made for them. In those cases, they don't have GTINs. It could be more broad, maybe certain t-shirts, if you're printing t-shirts, would also fall under custom goods. One difference that might be confusing is there's also a concept of customized goods, where you take a product that does have a GTIN, but do something to customize it or personalize it. In that case, we would require a GTIN because the product does have one. but you can use the is bundle attribute to tell us that it's bundled with personalization services, so that we know it's slightly different than the main product. But true custom goods won't require GTINs and generally don't have them anyway.
So that means a lot of shopping that I do at Etsy for a lot of these custom goods would not probably have a GTIN.
That's right.
Okay, great. So we have another question from Josh today, and he's asking, this is about manufacturer parts. So can you use a manufacturer part number, like say 440011 as a GTIN?
Great question. Historically, we have accepted manufacturer part numbers where merchants weren't able to give us GTINs. What we're finding is manufacturer part numbers, because they're not standardized across the industry, even for a given manufacturer, we're finding one manufacturer might issue different manufacturer part numbers or MPNs, and merchants are submitting a wide variety of them. So we found that we match incorrectly almost 6 times as often when trying to use a manufacturer part number instead of a GTIN. So in this case, this is why we're really moving to adopting GTINs, because there is a standards body, GS1, who defines the standard and ensures that these identifiers are unique around the world, and that gives us strong confidence.
Great, thanks.
Thanks, Mike. Next question, again from Josh. Is there a plan to add more products with GTIN requirements after this May 16th deadline? Will we see the warnings increase after we fix them by May 16th, I think is what the question is asking.
Right. So we won't change how we're determining what products should have GTINs. We're not going to sort of expand the requirements to new types of products. But as new products come onto the market, or as merchants submit new products that we see have GTINs, then in that case they would. But we aren't changing the rules. It'll really just be as new products. For instance, Apple just released a new iPhone. Once we start getting offers for that iPhone, it will require a GTIN.
Great, makes complete sense. Okay, so the next question is from Katie, and I think it's this question is being asked in several ways to us. If a product doesn't have a GTIN, what do we need to provide instead?
Yeah, great question. There are a lot of products, like we said, that don't have GTINs and won't have GTINs. In these cases, then going back to the a slightly earlier question, the manufacturer part number that you use internally is a good choice, because again, in that case, we're probably not matching it with other merchants' offers, but we still want to be able to identify it as which of the products from you as a retailer that is. So I would say continue to give us manufacturer part number and always give us brand. Brand is really important, whether you're giving us a GTIN or other identifiers. Brand is really, because that's one of the ways we can tell what the product is associated with. So we can tell that this product goes with this brand.
Thank you.
Great. I actually want to ask a related question to that, Mike, because I think some folks are wondering that we have all these benefits for offers that we have that submit GTIN, that have GTINs associated with it for our Google shopping experience. But some products, they just don't have GTINs. Is it a good long-term strategy for, say, a manufacturer to create GTINs to partner with GS1 to have GTINs for their products in the long run?
It is. And we're happy to see that most of the industry has adopted that standard, and most of the manufacturers that we work with already provide GTINs. But we do work very closely with GS1, and we work very closely with manufacturers to try to continually improve that. We want to make it easier for merchants to get GTINs, get the GTIN ranges from that are allocated by GS1, and in general make sure that there's a lot of clarity around how to use GTINs. So we're really working with the industry to make sure that this is beneficial to everybody in the ecosystem.
Okay, great. So we have another question from M, and this is regarding refurbished items. So he says, we got a warning that a GTIN won't match and these were refurbished HP Elite books, which get a different GTIN in the refurbishing. So he's asking, shall we provide the original ones from HP?
I guess I'd need to see a little more information about this. Generally, what we would prefer is if you, it should be, typically what we see is it's the same GTIN for the product, whether it's new, refurbished, or used. If they are getting a new one, it's not clear to me if that's the manufacturer who's changing that or the merchant. But if it is the manufacturer, then we would suggest continuing to use the different GTIN. But otherwise, we would want it to be the same so that we can group together the new, used, and refurbished item.
Thanks.
Great. Just wanted to make another shout out. If you do have questions for us on the new Google Shopping Ads GTIN requirement, which is scheduled to take into effect on May 16, 2016, please feel free to ask us. We're live and hoping to take all your questions. So next question. This is coming from Carolyn. The flag for GTINs, GTIN required, is being returned on items in the Merchant Center that have GTINs but aren't valid GTINs. There's just a request. I think it's a request. Can you please create another flag for incorrect GTINs and not just the ones that are blank?
So I think it's around the error message on diagnostic for GTINs.
Okay. Yeah, again, it would be interesting to see a little more information about this. We do check certain, we do look at GTINs to make sure they're formatted correctly. There's certain types of GTINs like restricted range GTINs and coupon codes and bulk items that we don't accept because they're meant to be internal for your, to your systems. So those would show up as invalid GTINs. Yeah, so in this case, I'm not sure what the specific case is, but please feel free to reach out through your sales channels, and we can try to get an answer for you.
Thanks. So there's another question from Carolyn, and she's asking if we can help define a store brand.
Right. So what we mean by store brand is really a brand that the seller and the manufacturer are the same. So there's a lot of apparel companies that sell their own clothing through their stores. These typically don't have GTINs, and if they do have GTINs, they're not necessarily required because they're only being used by that one store. So that's what we're really looking for: brands or products specifically that are being sold through a single seller, through your own retail stores.
Great, thanks, Mike. Do you need a break? I know I think we fired 15 questions at you already. This one I think is a good one. It's from Jeremy. He asks, we've seen 10 different warnings related to GTIN in this diagnostic section of the Merchant Center tab. Only 2 have a message relating to May 16th, or that say has the date and when they're going to be enforced. Will the other warnings, the other 8 warnings, remain as warnings?
Great question. Yes, for the time being, those will remain as warnings. We don't necessarily have plans to turn those into disapprovals. For the most part, what we're doing with those is trying to tell you, hey, there's something wrong with this GTIN and we can't use it as is. But if it's not a case where we need a valid GTIN, as in, for this GTIN requirement, then we're really just flagging them to tell you there's something wrong with it, but we're still going to use the offer. So we'll take a look at those over time to make sure that those are effective and they're useful to you as merchants. But ultimately, the ones that you really should focus on right now are the missing GTINs for the May 16th timeframe.
Okay, so we have another question from Jeremy. And he asks, has Google done across-the-board research on how many feeds are missing GTINs?
Yeah, great question. That was one of the first things we did when we realize the potential of getting more GTINs for these products is to see how much of an effect it would have. So we did. It turns out that it's a relatively small minority of merchants that that are really affected. We basically said how many merchants have more than 1% of their feed will be affected, and it was a relatively small percentage. It's a lot of you when you count up everybody, but it's a small percentage. So again, that's largely because for a couple of reasons. One, a lot of people have been giving us GTINs for a long time, especially in well-known brands. And so what we found is a lot of times when merchants are giving us GTINs for the top brands, like we had a requirement for in the fall of last year. When they started giving us GTINs for those brands, they just gave us GTINs for everything. In other words, they went to their inventory management systems or other sources and just got GTINs into their feed as a standard process going forward. So most of them were already in compliance with the new requirement. But there are, every merchant has probably a few exceptions to that, and other merchants are more greatly affected because they don't have GTINs as a standard part of their feed. But in general, we saw that most of the industry had already widely adopted GTINs, and so that that's part of why we feel comfortable that it's possible for everybody to get them, and that it will be beneficial to all of our retail partners to have these in their feed going forward.
Great. On that note, actually, Mike, I wanted to sort of ask you a follow-up on that, because I think it's a really important trend that's happening in the industry. You mentioned that there's a trend in terms of more online marketplaces and whatnot requiring GTINs as part of their selling process. Can you comment on that a little bit more? Are GTINs here to stay? Is this something that is a new normal for us in selling online?
Yeah, I think that's the right way to think about it. It is the new normal. I mean, part of what we're finding through working with the standards bodies, we're in a room with other big marketplaces. eBay is adopting GTINs pretty aggressively across their ecosystem, Amazon, Jet.com. So we see the marketplace in general adopting this. GS1, who is the standards body for this, is working really hard to make sure, like I said earlier, that the standards are easy to adopt and are beneficial to everybody within the ecosystem. Ultimately, what this does is it makes sure that your products are well understood across every possible system that you would send them to, so that you can get better performance, but also track performance, so that you can actually get reporting on the products that you're selling. And so, pretty much, it's actually a really effective standard, and it's one that I think will just continue to grow in adoption.
You want to take the next one?
Yeah, Mike, this is a question, I think, for apparel sellers. Should we have a separate GTIN for each color and size, each variant of a particular product?
Yeah, this is a question we get a lot, and the answer is yes. Every variant of a product should have a different GTIN. Again, that's part of the GS1 standard. And it does apply. It's really critical in apparel, but it's also something that shows up in other categories like electronics, the capacity and color of your smartphone. There's a number of products and verticals where variants are important. So yeah, we do ask that you provide a separate GTIN for each item. And that allows us, the example I always give is if you're enrolled in purchases on Google and somebody clicks the buy button, you're going to ship them a product. We really want to make sure that it's the right color and the right size.
Okay, thanks, Mike. So the next question is from Magdalena, and she asks what in the case that if we have a GTIN for a product in Europe, but they're different in US, like defined as UPC, and we cannot receive it from our supply chain, then how can we appropriately provide that number?
Right. So there's a couple different options here. If you do have different GTINs for the same product, you can supply both, and we will treat them as separate products. If that's the case, it's probably also the case that other merchants have different GTINs for the products in those different markets. I know that one of the things the standards body is trying to come up with is how to better handle global products and how to represent them around the world. If you aren't able to get the products in Europe into your feed, if they really truly are the same product, if you use the GTIN, the US GTIN, as the unique identifier, we'll identify those as the same product. They will match to the catalog correctly everywhere. But the key there is it really has to be the same product, not a variant of it. So ideally, we'll get you can get the identifiers directly from the source systems at some point. But if you can't, it is possible to submit them both with the US GTIN.
Great, thanks.
Thanks, Mike. Another shout out, just in case you're joining us, to this Google Shopping Ads GTIN requirement Hangout on Air. We wanted to let you know that we are open for questions. So please continue to submit your questions. I think you're giving us some really good hard ones. So we want to take all of your questions so we can hear directly from you. So please take a moment and enter any questions that you have. With that in mind, there's a question from Katie. I think what Katie wants to know is, in the past, we required a couple of attributes in the feed, EAN, brand, MPN, but we're doing a little bit of a shift. So on May 16th, we are requiring different attributes, which is brand and GTIN. Is that the way to think about it in terms of real tactical, if you're looking at your feed, the things that you need to have versus what you had before?
Yeah, that's exactly right. We're hoping to simplify the rules a little bit by moving away from the 2 out of 3. I don't know if we've totally simplified it, but it's basically as you just said, and in the way Katie asked it. We're really moving to think of it as sort of a cascade of start with GTIN and brand if you have GTIN and brand. If the product doesn't have a GTIN, use MPN and brand. And as I said earlier, brand is really important because that's one way we can very quickly categorize things and then use GTIN to very uniquely identify it. So yeah, I would think of it as GTIN and brand if you have it, if the GTINs exist, and then fall back to MPN if they don't.
Okay, so the next question is from Mike for Mike, and this is a new question, actually, interesting one. Says, say I have a high priority campaign and a low priority campaign, and so my high priority campaign has my custom good product that do not require GTIN, and my low priority campaign is a house brand, a specific product. For example, say I have Nike Golf Drive. So will Google serve products with GTINs over those, regardless of the campaign priority?
Yeah, that's a great question. I haven't heard that one before. So the answer is no, we won't favor products that have GTINs over those that don't. It's really independent from that. Where there could be an effect on how often your ads show up is if there are products that do have GTINs and you don't provide the GTINs, we might not be able to match your item to the product catalog, in which case you might be less likely to show up in results. But in terms of the priority of campaigns, we wouldn't favor products with GTINs over products that don't have GTINs in any way.
Thanks, Mike. That's a real small nuance, but really important, I think, for folks. Ready for your next question?
Yeah.
Okay, Florian asks, for now, only a small percentage of our products are flagged. In case our product catalog is updated, or your product catalog is updated, how long will the period be between the update and a new disapproval?
Yeah, that's a great question that we didn't touch on earlier. So after the May 16th date, when the requirement is in full effect, we'll still give you a grace period before disapproval. So I think currently that'll be a 2-week period, a warning period, where your products will show up in the diagnostics tab with a warning reminding you to add the GTIN, and that'll be there for 2 weeks, and then before it gets disapproved.
Okay, so we have another question, which is sort of like a typical scenario. It says that this is regarding ink cartridge that are remanufactured. So we have a different MPN for each application based on the printer. So if we have only one GTIN for these, since they are still the same card, would they end up being counted as duplicates?
Yeah, this is a great question. We see this a lot actually, where I think what you're talking about here is cases where you submit multiple offers in your feed for the same ink cartridge, and with the different MPNs representing the different printers that you're compatible with. And so this is really about making sure that we are understanding that the product is compatible with multiple printers. I think the reality here is that there isn't a great way otherwise to tell us to list the items that your products are compatible with. So this is fine. We do see this, and for now we're okay if you have multiple offers with the same GTIN to account for compatibility. In the future, we're going to try to solve this a more elegant way, but for now that's fine.
Okay, great, thanks.
Another shout out for more questions. In case you have them, we've got about 9 minutes left here on our Hangout on Air. So if you have any questions on the Google Shopping Ads new GTIN requirement, please submit them. We'd like to get through as many as we can, and we love hearing things that we haven't heard before.
Yeah,
to be honest, keeps the day interesting. Speaking of which, Matthew, actually, Katie has a question, but let me see if I can read it correctly. If we don't have a specific GTIN column in the feed, but we do have a EAN column, will this be accepted in the Merchant Center as a GTIN, or do we need to make sure there's another column? There's a specific GTIN column.
Yeah, this is a good question, and it's something we could have called out up front. GTIN EAN is actually a valid GTIN. UPC code is another valid GTIN. So yeah, if you're providing us with EANs, that's what we need. Great,
and yeah, I think it's worth repeating that GTIN is a superset, correct me if I'm wrong, of a number of different product identifiers, including EANs, ISBNs, which you find on books, UPCs, and probably a few others that I don't know about. Is that correct, Mike?
I think because of the global, a different country uses a different sort of name, but it's all clubbed under GTIN. Right, Mike?
Right, that's correct.
Okay. Okay, so we have another question from Tatiana, and she says, how is Google actually planning to check whether these GTIN that they are entering or that merchants are providing are actually correct? And if, say for example, if there's only one seller entering and no other manufacturers have entered theirs into the manufacturer center, how do we know that's the correct GTIN?
Yes, great question. So in some cases, GTINs won't be required for those products because they are only being sold through a single seller. If it's a new product and you're just the first one to send it to us, it probably won't be flagged. But as I think we mentioned earlier, the way we're looking for which products have GTINs is through manufacturers, through third-party sources, as well as other products in our catalog. So if we do see that this ultimately should require GTIN, it could show up later with a warning, but initially you probably won't get a warning for it.
Great, thanks, Mike. We have a question about, I think, product bundles. So for example, if we have a client that has a product that has multiple parts to it, like a stroller, every single item, I think, technically has a GTIN. So what do they submit? What do they do?
Right. So we've come across some of these as well. If there are anytime that there's a bundle that is, so there's two different types of bundles that we see. One which is a manufacturer bundle. So a common one is game consoles, right? The Xbox comes with a certain controller, a certain game. Those typically have different GTINs than the main product. Those are pretty straightforward. The cases where it's a bundle either created by you as the merchant or another party, for instance, there are subscription companies that will bundle multiple products together in sort of a sampler pack. In those cases, we would suggest either sending us the GTIN of the primary product, if there's sort of a primary product in that bundle, and then use the is bundle flag to tell us it's a bundle so that we know it's not just the product alone. That would be great. Or if they really are just a collection of an assortment of products with no strong dominant product, it's okay in that case to omit a GTIN. Again, please mark it as is bundle so that we know that this is a bundle, and we won't enforce on it, because typically those aren't things being sold in multiple from multiple stores anyway.
Great.
Okay.
Thanks, Mike. I think that actually takes us to our last question of today. So we wanted to, I know Shweta and I definitely want to thank you, Mike, for being able to answer, I think, from our count, 25 questions in this time period. Thank you so much. You probably need some water and probably a little bit of a break, but I'm sure our viewers and our listeners really appreciate it. With that, we wanted to just say thanks for joining us today. Thank you for watching and learning more about GTINs, more about the new shopping ads GTIN requirement. We have 7 weeks left till the deadline, so we want to wish you the best of luck. We're here for you. When you have questions, please don't feel like you're on your own. But until then, thank you so much. We really enjoyed it.
Yeah, and we do understand it's going to be a lot of work at your end to provide these GTINs, but it'll ultimately improve the performance of your shopping ad and help Google to match your product to the right catalog and hence serve it the right way. So we are very excited for you, and I really want you to be excited as well to provide the GTINs. And yes, to remember, May 16, 2016, by then Google will require all merchants to submit correct GTINs. Right?
That's right.
Okay.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.